Okay.
Hello, future veterinarians. This is our APVMA podcast, and today we have Richard Weiner from A Refuge for Saving Wildlife on the topic of avian education and medical care. So, first of all, we're going to have Rich introduce himself.
Hi, thank you, Gretel. Thanks for having me, and welcome to everybody who's going to be listening. So, my name is Rich Weiner, and my wife Karen and I both run a refuge for saving the wildlife. I've been doing this since I started in 1991, and then Karen came several years later. So we've been running the business since then.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
What originally inspired you for the founding of the bird sanctuary, and how has its mission evolved over time?
Okay. So when I started, I used to foster cats for another organization because I'd had cats all my life. And I was a young police officer working a foot patrol beat one night. And I saw a guy from the town over. He's walking around with this umbrella or Moluccan cockatoo on his shoulder. And I saw this absolutely incredible interaction between the two of them. And I thought, wow, this is what I've got to find out all about. So I saw a cockatoo, thought that's what I wanted is a cockatoo. But when I started looking, I realized, well, there weren't any rescues. And I thought that cockatoos and working a lot of midnights probably isn't going to be the best mix. So I bought my first bird from a breeder, unfortunately, Prince, my African gray. Now, as far as evolving, it's changed drastically over the years. In the beginning, it was just people would give me birds and I would, take them to the vet, get the vet work done, and then give them away. But then the more people got to know me, the more I got more birds. And I go, okay, well, I can't keep doing this because it was costly. And so I looked for other rescues because this was a couple years into it now. So I started looking for other rescues and I found no bird rescues, just cat and dog. And some of them would take birds. I went and looked at them and I didn't think their cage setups or anything were really conducive to a bird's welfare. So I thought, well, I guess this is what I have to do. So I became incorporated, got my not-for-profit, and then started doing it. And over the years, probably 200-300 birds we'd handle. In the beginning, again, we take, people call us up, we take them, do the disease testing, and then try and adopt them out. We try and recoup our costs. The problem was that after we'd have a bird for a year, it'd go back to the vet. And after a couple of years, I go back to the vet every year. I couldn't keep charging those fees. So we decided I was just going to charge the initial vet costs for the disease testing since that was the most costly. And now it's gotten to a point where just because funding, money is tight, we try and get the family who's surrendering the bird to do the disease testing. And then we take the bird and we're very, 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 very selective now in the birds we take. No more anything goes because some birds are just not willing to be companion animals. And we're too small to take in that many birds. Right now, we're pretty much full. So we're very, very selective in the birds we take now.
I know it must be so much harder because there's always a demand for birds to find a quality home. And so I can understand how hard that is to have to turn some away for the safety of the others.
Hey PVMA, this is Michaela Duchel, your current webmaster. You might recognize my voice as the usual host for the APVMA interview series. Our amazing President Gretel conducted this interview, and I'd like to give her a huge shout out. I would also like to mention Dr. Kemba Marshall, a trailblazer in veterinary medicine. Her book, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Veterinary Medicine, is now available as an ebook through Wiley Publisher and will be available in print coming soon. With insights from Dr. Marshall and other diverse voices, this book delivers practical, actionable strategies to integrate DEI into veterinary practice, covering everything from unconscious bias to community engagement with First Nation, queer, and neurodiverse groups. It is the ultimate guide for creating a more inclusive and impactful profession. Her book is available for purchasing through Wiley Publishers and will be linked in our Instagram bio. See you later, Michaela.
Going off of that, could you tell us more about your daily operations and routines like veterinary care for the birds too?
Sure. So Our day starts obviously fairly early. We get up, and depending on how organized I am the night before, did I get all the meds set up and ready to go for the next day? Sometimes yes, most of the time no. So it's about to complete all the meds, get them ready for morning. It's about an hour and a half to get them all ready.
Wow.
So of 64 birds we have right now, 32 of them are on meds, and some of them are on multiple meds, up to 8 a day. So it takes me about an hour and a half to get all that ready. And then we have two rooms, a big cockatoo room and then a smaller room that's kind of mixed. Karen takes one room, I take the other room. We start going about passing out meds. Some are oral, some are we put in treats. We get all that done. And then we start the day. So we start by cleaning. So that's pulling cage paper, rotating toys that are needed, check for safety of cages, toys, swap out food and water. All the water bowls are done in the dishwasher. Get them all fed, and then we sweep. So then we go midday. Some birds are on midday medication, so we go through all that. Again, we'll sweep, check for dirty waters, see if they've got food. If not, we'll top them off and stuff like that. And then PM, we go through and do the same thing. Then it's all meds again, sweeping, top off foods, check for waters. And then so a day takes about total, depending on if we have a volunteer or not, 6, 7, 8 hours to complete everything.
A lot of labor, a lot you have to take on.
Yeah, it's a lot of labor of love.
Labor of love is true. It would be great if we could make you some connections on our podcast to fellow bird lovers.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they could come to the Chicago suburbs and help out, or know people who would want to.
We'd love them.
That would be great.
Yes.
So what are some of the most common challenges you face in running the sanctuary? Is it the time commitment or the amount of labor or anything that has to do with the means of owning birds?
It's mostly, the work is the work. Karen and I have not gone on a vacation together since 2012. So, but I started this, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Honestly, so I don't go on vacations a lot. I spend my time caring for these guys, and that's okay. Karen and I do stuff together. But the biggest thing is things like money, volunteers, and sometimes there's just not enough time to do everything that we'd like to do. Everything is secondary. All the administration comes secondary to the actual care of the birds. So that's the stuff we don't have always time for. We don't have enough space. When I started this, I had bird cages in just about every room in my house. I was a bachelor, so it really didn't matter. I had my bedroom and I had my office, and everywhere else was birds. That obviously had to change. And so we built the addition in 2009. And as soon as we opened up, we were full. Wall-to-wall birds, wall-to-wall cages. So, and we are maxed out when we put the addition on. We went as big as we possibly could for the rescue. There's not enough vets. I mean, there are lots of dog and cat vets, not so much when it comes to vets who will take birds. Now there's some dog and cat vets who will see birds, but it's mostly, nail grooming and stuff like that, but they don't do the necessary stuff, the blood work. They don't know how to process a sick bird. And then lastly is succession planning. I mean, Karen and I are not going to be able to do this forever. And with not a lot of people stepping up, I mean, we get volunteers that'll come in and we think, okay, we got somebody here, and then life gets in the way. They get married, they get divorced, they have kids, the kids move in, the kids move out, and suddenly this is kind of second nature. For us, this is the way we live, and this is what we do.
It's very challenging for many rescues.
Yep.
Try to be able to find consistent help, and especially when, even in the veterinary community, we have so many motivated students, but they don't know enough about opportunities with avian medicine because there aren't very many vets.
No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
There's also a very small-minded way of being in the vet community of, oh, I just want to do cats and dogs, but they're limiting themselves from a lot of learning. And a lot of parrots really need great veterinary care as well. So I'm really glad you're bringing up this topic. Do you think that,
Third largest population of pets, cats.
right? Do you
We
think
need,
there are ways to increase that number of vets going into avian medicine?
I think what we're doing is a start.
Yeah.
I think that obviously Adia came to us and connected you guys with us, which I think is huge. The other school that we're aligned with is Joliet Junior College. Now they're vet tech students, not vet students, but that's a step in that direction.
Definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Going along with that, how do you think we can better educate the public about bird ownership too? So I know a lot of it is preventative care as well.
Yes. Well, we use our website. Again, website administration kind of takes a back seat to the caring of the birds.
Right.
I mean, we'd like to put out so much more on our website than we do. We have, social media people, they come and they go just like regular volunteers. Everybody's committed when they first get here, and then they realize it's a lot of work. I mean, some people come start their first day and then realize, this is way too much for me. Somebody come, they think, we're going to play with birds. Well, yeah, when everything is done, we can all kind of chill out and play with birds all we want. We got to get the work done before we can do that. The website, lectures, podcasts like this, our vet's offices, when we're obviously we do have a lot of time we spend at the vet's offices because we have not only the birds, but we have, we pick up other animals along the way, like the owls, the pigeons, the dogs, the cats, the tortoises, and the turtle. So we don't go looking out for other species. We're also not going to say, well, we'll take your bird, but we'll leave your tortoises there type of thing. So we're at the vet's office, sometimes a couple times a week. They come in, they see us with, either bird cages or different kind of containers and stuff. And so we try to show them what we do and talk to them. And then lastly, we used to do things like pet expos and stuff, but we found that with the proliferation of pet stores and breeders at the same events, it's kind of a stab in our back because it's showing that it's okay to go there. And I'm not going to downplay what they do. The problem is that we got bird rescues all over the U.S. and they're all overflowing. Nobody has enough room. And yet we're still breeding birds for captivity. Call it what it is. I think that's very short-sighted. I mean, now they're even having pet stores. I've seen 2 pet stores in our area that actually allow you to finance your bird. So you can finance a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 bird over many months. Well, if you can't afford the bird, you can't afford the vet care, you can't afford the cage and everything that goes with it. So it's just way counterproductive to what we do. I think, if we can find homes for our birds, we'd be in a much better place.
No, I completely agree, especially with our lack of avian vets. You're adding them more accessible to the general public who probably are not as knowledgeable. Because if you're going to spend that much money, a lot of the times people do a lot of research on the animal they're going to get. I come from the equine world, and birds and horses, I think, are pretty comparable in price, and most horse owners are pretty educated. Do you think most bird owners are pretty educated? No.
Unfortunately, no. I think the problem is, and we've tried this ourselves. You go into a pet store, and you try to talk to somebody about birds, and it's like they just don't know, and they give misinformation. First of all, their diet is very difficult. They don't live on what they would in the wild. But to sell a bird, you want to sell the food that goes with it. 99 times out of 100, it's going to be a seed diet, which is terrible for a bird. High energy, lots of movement, doesn't get that. So we create perch potatoes that's eating a high-fat diet. And hence all the age-old diseases that we see in humans, we see in birds when they don't eat well.
Like McDonald's every day.
Exactly.
It's not right. I have found I've had a lot of personal struggle when I see pet stores. So I'm a rabbit owner, and there's a ton of misinformation. Like they should never be caged, space requirements. They just feed pellets, hay too. At least they're good about that. There's always a staple of hay, but they're missing the vegetable environment. So I really think, when people go and they want an animal and they're trusting the pet stores, you really should speak to your veterinarian if you're thinking about getting an animal, one who specifically knows the breed. Yeah.
Especially because of the fact that, let's face it, people who work at a pet store a lot of times are animal lovers.
Yeah.
But the majority of them are dog and cats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dogs have been domesticated for 14,000 years. They're pretty much okay, and they're pretty solid.
Yeah.
So people know that, and that's where they gain their knowledge from. And then they try to pass it off on birds, pocket pets, exotics, all sorts of things, and it just doesn't work.
Right. It's not the same. And
No.
also their mentality, even though if they were born in captivity, they're still going to have different requirements than a domestic animal would.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Going off of that, how do you all assess health and well-being of the birds in the care? You talked about having specific disease testing. Could you go into detail about that?
Absolutely. So since we're being much more exclusive about taking in our birds, the first thing we like to do is go meet the bird in its home so we can assess their behavior. Once they pass that, then the idea is we have to get them to the vet. And that's up to the family now to do that. And what we require is the 4 big disease tests. So that's psittacosis, polyoma, beak and feather, and the avian bornovirus. Then we add in a CBC, an avian chem panel, and a fecal. Then when they're going through all of that, whatever else kind of pops up in the exam, do it because they're there and whatever. So the diseases, unlike dogs and cats and many other animals, they're airborne.
Mm-hmm.
And being that birds specifically are prey animals, they have this reflexive instinct called the masking reflex, where they will mask their illness because they're prey animals and they're flock animals. And if they show that they're sick, they will either be left behind by their flock to be eaten by predators or attacked by a predator. And so they mask it. And so the average owner of a bird that doesn't have the knowledge, by the time they think that a bird is sick, i.e., it's on the bottom of the cage, it's fluffed up, it's not vocalizing, it's not eating, they're within hours to a day or two of dying. It's way before that they have to know that they need to be able to see and know what's going on. And like you mentioned, preventive care. And then the disease testing that we do. When we get a bird in, we know it is as healthy as is scientifically possible at the time that we do the testing and everything.
Well, it's incredibly important. Like you said, a lot of people go into birds, say you're not feeding them the correct diet, you don't have the correct preventative care, checkups on what could be going on. It's a recipe for disaster, and a lot of people don't know. They really don't know.
Nobody tells them. The pet stores aren't going to tell them, because if you go out and spend $500 on a pet bird,
mm-hmm.
There's a cage. That could be, fairly expensive. You can get another cage for $500. Toys, and food. Now, again, most of the time they're going to get some crappy seed diet, so they'll get what's cheaper because now the money's really starting to add up here. And then vet care on top of it. I've heard this 1,000 times if I've heard it once. No, the bird's fine. We had it checked out. Well, any of the pet stores that have their own vets, I don't really say in-house, but they have the little satellites. There's never been an avian vet that's worked at anyone that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a dog and cat vet that's seeing birds, that doesn't know much about them, and telling them it's okay. They don't talk about annual care. I will tell you that in the years that we've done this, the percentage of birds that have actually seen a vet before we get contacted for surrender is maybe 5 to 8%.
Wow.
All the other, and some of them, these birds have 30 and 40 years when they get surrendered. So they've never been to a vet. So it's like, and it's hard to understand, it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that here we have a living, breathing, sentient creature. You're an animal lover, but you don't think that this bird would ever have to go to a vet. Well, their answer is always, well, it never looks sick. And you ask them, what does a sick bird look like? And it's like crickets.
Exactly. They don't exactly know what to look for. And we need trained veterinarians who can prevent some of this bad pet trait. I think that there are ethical ways to rehome birds, but it's so much more into it. And as a population, we need to be better educated on what we should expect out of these sources that are supposed to be reputable.
Yes.
Yes. And so going on about your daily operations at the rescue, could you tell us about any natural behaviors that the birds express or enrichment activities you get to help them to express these things?
But like I said, they're only one generation out of the wild.
Right.
So they are still wild animals.
Mm-hmm.
So they can be unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
They can bite. They're loud. They're destructive. And a lot of those behaviors are behaviors that they do in the wild. So they're all very natural. Mm-hmm. I see, you see the posts all the time on all the social media platforms. My bird's screaming, I want it to shut up. How can I get it to shut up? My bird's pooping everywhere. How can I get it to stop pooping everywhere? Mm-hmm. My bird's destroying every toy I give it. Exactly. That's what toys are meant to be. We're not talking about something that just plays with a rope toy like a dog does. These birds are there to destroy them. They have a lot of energy. They need to dissipate that somehow. Mm-hmm. So in the wild, they'll fly hundreds of miles a day foraging for food because that's, it's availability. So they burn up all of this energy. But in captivity, we put them in a small cage where they don't get to fly around or move around a lot and just give them a bowl of food. Like I said before, we basically make them a perch potato and they get fat. They get all the age-old diseases from doing that. So the idea is to give them lots and lots of stuff to chew on, lots and lots of stuff. The cage has got to be as big as you can possibly get. Years and years ago when I started this, they used to say that your cage needed to be beyond the bird's wingspan so they can expand that. That's woefully inadequate. It needs to be 10 times that size. They need to be able to crawl and climb and do all sorts of things. And you need to provide them things to do to force them to move around. The idea of just filling a bowl with food is ludicrous this day and age. I mean, what we start teaching them is we'll lay a note card on top of it, make them move the paper out of the way. And then eventually, once they get that, tie it down. So they now got to tear the paper. Put things in things to make them chew through to get their food. Again, they're working, they're burning off this energy. They're going to be happier and healthier by doing things like that. So provide them the things that give them the mental stimulation to have a happy, healthy life is what we try to do. And it's individualistic. Every bird likes something different. So you have to kind of look and see when you put toys in there, what are they going for? What are they absolutely not going for? And then take that toy and give it to somebody else, but then find what they want. And then that's the kind of toys you keep giving to them. I mean, we probably spend $3,000. So it's $1,000 a month on toys. That's about what it comes out to. Every 3 months, we'll buy about $3,000 worth of toys. So, and they're destroyed honestly, a lot of the toys are destroyed in a couple of days.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's part of the approach when people go in and they think about, oh, I want a bird. Like you said, all the costs add up. It's not just the initial cost. It's additionally the management cost and the time it requires for you to have these practices. People need to keep this in mind. Going on to adding things for them to get food, what specific dietary needs do they typically have that would be advertised else in other sources?
So our vet who started when before he was a vet, he worked for a guy by the name of Ted Lefebvre. have a fever, is famous for making the parrot pellet. Since then, lots of iterations of pellets. We try in captivity. The pelleted diet is the best that we have. Now, when I got my first bird in 1988, the only thing they had were Purina monkey biscuits. It was the closest thing to a pelleted diet because it looked like a big pillow, a big crunchy pillow. And that's what I was told to feed. Years later, fast forward, the parrot pellets were made. So we do feed a predominantly pelleted diet, but we also supplement it with things like dehydrated veggies so that we can put them in the bowl and not worry about bacteria. We'll have volunteers that'll come and do fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, we're bigger on vegetables than we are on fruits. Fruits, a lot of sugar, a lot of water, a lot of loose stools, and a lot of excess energy from the sugar. So that's a treat once in a while. But veggies, we're fine with veggies all the time. Dehydrated pasta gives them, the thing is colors, shapes, sizes, textures, all sorts of things that they can do. And what's funny is since we don't stick to one brand of pellet, just like you wouldn't feed your child or yourself the same diet day in and day out for years, we mix them all together. And then we find which ones they prefer. And we tend to give them more of that. But then what we've also found is that sometimes days, weeks, months later, they've completely changed and don't like that brand anymore, and they'll eat something else. So it's a constant battle to try and keep up with what it is that they like. And as long as it's as currently scientifically sound as possible, we'll feed it.
So much information. I just spent a couple weeks in Costa Rica with Audia, and we were working with the Amazons, and we fed them a lot of fruits and vegetables and some seeds and some like amino acid mixes in there. And that was the first time I've ever been introduced to diets like this, like correct diets like this, because everyone just talks about seeds for the most part. So being able to see that, it was a big educational hurdle for me.
Good.
Speaking of, oh yes, I feel very blessed. Speaking of other medical troubles normally, because diet can impact that. What are some medical issues that birds face currently if they're not handled correctly?
Well, first it starts generally from them being bred.
Right.
Because if that's not handled correctly, then it kind of compounds the problem years later. So how they're bred, whether they're parent raised or breeder raised, and then if what they're fed and how they're fed, because feeding the birds is a social interaction. It's not just about getting the food. I mean, birds literally feed each other beak to beak. When you're syringe feeding a bunch of birds, because time is short versus being fed by their parents, there's no social interaction. So they don't have that connection. And so then they sell their birds out, and then they're not told about a pelleted, well-balanced, rounded diet, and they go on seed, high fat. So you see atherosclerosis, heart disease, kidney disease, arthritis. So all those things, while may not be 100% preventable, it can be reduced drastically by starting them out early on in life with all the good stuff in hopes of not. But like I said, I've got 64 birds, 32 of them are on meds. And it's a lot. And most people are not prepared to be able to do what they need to do as their birds get older and older, and their health starts failing. It's tough to watch.
Sure it is. And a lot of the birds you've had, you didn't manage early on in their lives.
And it's funny because since the rescue's been going a long time, we do have at least one wild caught that I know of that we have. Knock on wood, no health problems, no meds. I mean, some of our birds are not on meds, and some of our birds do come from very conscientious homes that just for whatever reason, they just couldn't continue to care for them. And
Right.
we totally get that. There's a reason why rescues are here, but it's the overabundance of the poorly cared for bird that's in a throwaway society that once we're done, we're done. I mean, I get calls almost daily. Well, I'm moving and I can't take my birds with me. Okay, well, when are you moving? Next week. Okay. And when did you know you were moving? Oh, 6 months ago. So you're looking today to do this. And it's a travesty that I try to give them resources, but at a week's time, you're not going to find something to do. And I'm afraid there are, if you look on like Lost and Found Pets of Illinois and stuff like that, you will find hundreds of birds that are out there. I do believe that some are just the doors left open and they let them go, assuming that the bird is going to survive because they live outside anyway. It's completely not true.
No, they have no means of knowing how to survive once they've been in captivity. And you're also introducing an invasive species into the environment too, which can have catastrophic effects that people do not think about. Personally, I found my rabbit outside. Someone had abandoned him when I was in high school. And then I became educated on rabbit care, and he would not have lasted a day. There were hawks circling above him.
I had a call from, I can't remember, some northern suburb police department who somebody dumped an African gray in the forest preserves. And I went out there and it was sitting on a cage, fully flighted, on a little cat carrier, fully flighted with basically a sunflower seed bag torn open for him to eat. It was unconscionable to me to believe that somebody thought that was okay.
Right. It should never be okay. For current bird owners that possibly face the difficulty, I believe most birds live around the lifespan of a human, correct?
Absolutely.
Say if they need to rehome a bird or need resources for that, what would you suggest? Or if they want to be better educated on how to handle their birds?
Call us.
Mm-hmm.
Call us. Come volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of our volunteers have learned immensely. Some of our volunteers we've had 10, 12, 15 years. A lot come and go.
Mm-hmm.
We had one volunteer that came in years ago, wanted, her and her daughter said, well, first she called up because she wanted a cockatoo. So my wife, being how she is with her cockatoos, she said, you know what, you have no experience. Why don't you come out and volunteer and see what it's like? They came out. Her daughter was like 12 at the time. She's like 25 now. And the first day she was here, she said, I will never adopt a cockatoo after listening to a room full of almost 30 cockatoos. And she adopted a couple of grays, a Myers parrot. People think they know what they want because it's what they saw. Like I did when I saw a cockatoo, thought that's what I wanted, did some research, realized that was not going to work for me. Now, of course, I got my cockatoo 3 years later, who I still have, but we're here our biggest mission is to help keep birds in their homes and to educate the public about caring for their birds.
No, I completely agree. I'm also not a big fan of moving animals out of loving homes. I think it's a lot better to develop a trusting relationship with them and provide them with the education that they need. Of course, there are instances where change can't happen in their home, and it would be better to move them, but just trying first, I think, is always the best way to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
And speaking of adding more information into the public eye, how do you both stay updated on advancements in medicine? Is your exotic vet very current with research, or is a lot of it pretty stable throughout time?
It is not stable. It is changing. It is changing all the time. And She's young. She took over the practice from our original vet, who unfortunately passed from COVID right at the beginning of COVID. So threw them into a complete tizzy. She now runs the clinic and is doing a fabulous job. Now, we've got a very, very good working relationship with her, which really helps. So she's, as much as she possibly can be, available to answer our questions. She will. She trusts what we do here. She actually comes out here twice a year, spends 2 8-hour days with one tech. So between the four of us, we go through all the birds done, all their blood work and exams in 2 8-hour days. And so she sees what we do. She understands what we do. And I do feel has a good trust in what we do as we do in her. And then besides that, we try to find every educational opportunity there is. Not much for birds when I first started. We're getting to be a little bit more and more and more. I buy books all the time. Anything I can get my hands on to learn. Even sometimes some of the stuff is probably outdated, not the best, but I try it anyway to kind of see what kind of information is out there. And it's just a matter. Keep going, learning all the time.
Life of learning.
It
Just
is.
like veterinarians. Life of learning.
Just like that. Absolutely.
Exactly. What would you suggest to people like me? So I started off thinking that I wanted to specifically stay in the domesticated animal world, but I've been doing more exotics over time and I've had exotic pets. So I would like to see birds one day, but I don't have as much experience. What would you recommend for people wanting to go and have some, at least avian medicine in their practices?
Come find a place to either intern or volunteer. Intern at our vet's office, volunteer here. Find places that you can trust. Once you can find a place you can trust, go find some time to do either interning or volunteering. It's like you said, being in Costa Rica, you got hands-on. Most people are hands-on learners. And if you're not necessarily hands-on, you can at least watch until you're comfortable. Because we get it. Birds bite. I've been bitten 4,000 or 5,000 times and it still hurts. But the idea is also to learn bird behavior, because the bird behavior is going to reduce the number of bites you take, because they bite. They're wild animals and they do bite. But you can start to read birds and their body language and when they don't want to be touched. And sometimes you have to touch them no matter what.
Right.
But there's way to tell them so it's not to get.
Right.
There's lots to learn, hands-on, and it's a matter of being comfortable with your skills. So you need to get the skills to be able to perform, appropriately with whatever animal you want to do.
Exactly. I think that a lot of our pre-vet and vet generation now and for the future needs to be open-minded and not just say, oh, that's scary. I can't do that. I'm going to stick with what makes me comfortable. Because like you said, they're the number 3 pet in the world and they need care. And we're making a commitment to at least learn the basics of all the species if we can provide some sort of help. Even if it isn't, you don't have to be a full-blown exotic vet all of the time. Right. But if you can recognize some issues and make recommendations or send them to another professional, I think that's a lot better than just closing the door and saying no.
Exactly. And even if you remember when we were down there and visited with you guys, the one question I asked, I said, okay, now honestly, who's afraid of birds? It took a little bit for 1 or 2 hands to pop up. But by the end of it, when we go out, we try to tell people, first of all, we make this look real easy handling these guys. And we bring the best of the best.
Right.
Once you get beyond your fear of the unknown, because it's the unknown that you don't know. Because I do remember Peaches was all over you.
Right.
So it's getting past that. Once you get past that, it opens a whole new world for you.
Exactly. We were handling wild caught birds that were being treated in Costa Rica. very, very different experience than.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But after handling Peaches,
Mhm.
you then had an idea of not the end of the world, not the most fearful thing to
Right.
deal with. And when handled properly, even the wild caughts can be handled.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Really being educated on correct restraint is very, very important in the bird world. And luckily, at least most birds are not human sized or bigger than human
It's,
size.
exactly.
So,
Makes it a little bit easier.
yes, exactly. It just takes an education and really actively trying.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll leave it on what are your long term goals for the sanctuary and for the field of exotic animal ownership and rescue?
Well, we will continue to help the public by educating as best we can, doing what we can to help their birds when they can no longer care for them. But the bottom line is going to be succession planning. That is probably number one for us right now, because I don't want to wind up one day being so old and so out of it that both my wife and I wind up dying here, and then somebody coming in, they have to clean up a mess.
Right.
And it's happened. It's
Mhm.
happened. It's a scary thought. We want to be well prepared and have a plan in place so that when we know that we physically can no longer do this, we have a plan to do what's best for everybody we have here.
Definitely. I think that's incredibly important, and it speaks to your level of education because there are a lot of rescues who deal with this problem all the time. Where do you go with this large amount of animals who are not easy to care for and they're there for a reason? So I think we need more veterinarians who will see clients like this because they'll have more connections and they'll know. Say you can at least get half of the birds rehomed in
Yep.
the next however many years until retirement. That would be
Yes.
a great goal. We can use platforms like this and hopefully connect you all to more people who are just as passionate about birds.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. And thank you so much for your time. Everyone on the podcast, please reach out to a Refuge for Saving Wildlife. I believe they also take donations and
Yes.
vet students who would love to shadow. We will be linking all of their information on our podcast website, Instagram, Facebook group with over 18,000 members. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.